Tommy Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. I want to make some comments generally on the bill as a whole and then to discuss the individual amendments that have been selected. I have to start by saying that it's clearly not ideal to have an election a couple of weeks before Christmas for anyone. The nights are fair drawing in. It will be cold and it will be dark, and many of the people in this country will be prepared, quite understandably, in looking forward to Christmas and spending time with their family and relatives. So it's hardly an ideal time. But from our perspective in the SNP, we think this is a necessary requirement now, because we have reached a situation of impasse in this Parliament where it is incapable of resolving probably the biggest political issue that has divided the United Kingdom in my lifetime. There are competing views as to what the end point of the Brexit process should be. And parliamentary democracy in this country, it seems to me, has now reached a point of stasis where it is incapable of adjudicating between those outcomes. It is therefore right and proper, in my view, that we should go back to the electorate and allow them to reflect on what can happen. So this will be very much the Brexit election. And I am very pleased that we have moved the government from the position that it had a few weeks ago, where it didn't actually want a Brexit election.
Yes.
It didn't want a Brexit election where the people will be allowed to cast their views about different outcomes. It wanted to get Brexit done and then go to the electorate afterwards. And that would have been a travesty, Mr Hoyle, because what that would have said to people is, we're going to have a general election. Brexit will be one of the big topics of conversation, but there's really no point you expressing a view, because we're going to conclude the matter before the first ballot is cast. That would have been a ridiculous anti-democratic situation, and I'm glad that we have got the Prime Minister and the government away from that, even if it does mean he might be looking for a ditch on Thursday. Now, the reason why many people have said, lamented the fact that 3.5 years on, Parliament hasn't resolved this matter. In my view, that's simply because it is without any reasonable resolution, because the promise of Brexit has turned out to be a lie. People were told in 2016 that they could vote to leave the European Union and they would be better off as a result. That is not true. And hardly anyone in this chamber would now argue that that was true. In fact, it is a matter of how bad the different options are in terms of Brexit going ahead. And that is why, quite understandably, now there is a large body of opinion in this country for whom the conclusion of this process should be to say, that's it, it's gone far enough, stop it now, we want to get off. And I think an election will allow that view to come to the fore and for people to do it. The election will also allow the Prime Minister to put his particular deal before the electorate. Because be under no illusions, what the Prime Minister has done is he has taken an extremely flawed deal that was come up by his predecessor, and he has made it immeasurably worse. This is a proposal, a series of proposals that the Prime Minister has agreed with the European Union that will impoverish people in this country, that will remove the standing of the United Kingdom very much in the eyes of the world and leave it a much worse place. I don't want that for the people of England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and I certainly don't want that outcome for the people of Scotland. And that is why it is right and proper that the Prime Minister should put his case before the electorate. And I look forward to the Prime Minister being challenged, not just by opposition parties, but by Nigel Farage as well, to see whether or not the deal that he's come up with satisfies the real hard-right Brexiteers for whom nothing will sate their appetite. Now, the situation in Scotland, of course, Chair, as many people have remarked, is quite different. 62% of the people of Scotland didn't vote for this mess, and that's 62%, by the way, once we exclude most teenage voters at the time and most people who were born elsewhere in the European Union. Had they been allowed to take part in that decision, the figure would have been far higher still. And if the decision were asked again today, it would be far higher still. And it is my responsibility here to represent the people who elected me. So happily take an intervention.
Thank
him for giving way on the issue of votes for 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds. I believe that all men and women are born equal, and in this place everybody should be equal. And the amendment, which fortunately was not picked today, would have given 16 and 17-year-olds in Scotland and in Wales the vote. But
order. You're out of order. It is not debatable.
Thomas Shipton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm confused as to why that particular intervention should be made at this point in what I was saying, but I will come on to mention that when I consider the amendments that are before us. But I want to say for now that I think it was the honourable member for Birmingham Yardley who said that, well, what could happen in the outcome of elections is we get another hung parliament without a majority one way or the other. That, of course, is true. But an election will allow all of us the opportunity to refresh a mandate. Because I, for one, believe there are far too many people in this Parliament who are imprisoned by an out-of-date mandate from 2017, which is against what they would want to do now, having considered the matter. And it will give colleagues, particularly in Her Majesty's opposition, particularly in seats where a majority voted to leave the European Union, the opportunity to go there and argue, if they so wish, for a rethink and for this matter to be put back to the public before any final decision is taken. That mandate is not present at this Parliament. That mandate could be present in a new Parliament, and that is one of the reasons why I think an election would be welcome as well. I will, but I'm anxious of time.
On the question of the mandate, if we look at the 2016 referendum, it is a fact that in that referendum, electoral offences were committed by vote leave. The campaign, the Prime Minister, the Chancellor of the Duchess of Lancaster and their Chief Advisor were actually involved in. Isn't this general election an opportunity to highlight their role and for a new government to investigate their role properly, something which has not been done under this government?
Indeed. I mean, there would be the opportunity to do that, and I think those transgressions should be investigated, and I do think they undermine the result of the 2016 referendum. Yet another reason why I think the electorate should be allowed to look at this matter again. But on the question of mandates, I also want to be very clear, Chair, that when it comes to mandates in Scotland, we will be fighting this general election for three objectives. One will be to stop Brexit, not to rubber stamp it. Two will be to get rid of the most right-wing Tory government in my lifetime. And three will be to demand that people in Scotland have got the right to choose an alternative future, an alternative path of doing things, and should not be dragged along against their will. And we will put that case to the people in Scotland, and if we win that mandate, and if we win that election, then I demand that other people in this chamber respect that decision and do not stand in the way of the people of Scotland when they next seek the opportunity to determine their own method of governance. Chair, if I could just turn in closing to the amendments. I do regret, and I won't discuss them because I know they haven't been selected, but I'd simply to say I think it's a matter of regret that we are not able, at this time of political crisis where we are discussing how to get out of it, we're not able to seize the opportunity to extend our franchise and allow two very important groups of people in our community who have a vested interest more than we do in the outcome of this decision, allow them the opportunity to participate. So I regret that. Okay.
On the point of voting age, I just wonder if the honourable member appreciates, I'm sure he does, that of the 16, 17-year-olds who were 16 or who were 17-year-old in 2016 were 18-year-old and of voting age in 2017, when 56% of voters in Scotland voted for either the Conservative Party or Labour, who at the time, at least in the case of Labour, were committed to delivering on Brexit.
I'm unclear that that's an argument against 16 to 17-year-olds being able to vote in this election or indeed on any subsequent election.
As a principle,
it's called clutching at straws.
Well, gentleman, for giving way, and just to say I entirely concur with his points, and indeed this is a point I made more widely in the second reading debate. I do think it's a shame. Obviously, we're not able to discuss amendments that haven't been selected, but I do concur entirely with the point he's making.
Thank you very much. I think there is a broad level of agreement actually across the House, including the odd one over on that side of the Chamber as well who would agree that the time has surely come to extend the franchise. And I would hope that we don't end up in a situation where we have a general election in December and it lasts for another 5 years before we can even consider this possible enfranchisement. So it would have been a timely opportunity to seize, but we've chosen not to do so. Chair, the amendments that have been selected, let me just say that we are very much in favour of the amendment which suggests the date should move to the 9th of December, and we shall be voting for that tonight. I don't understand. The government said it wanted an election as soon as possible, so why would it not wish to have it 3 days earlier than the date? I think I've taken enough in fairness. I need to conclude. No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. Which part of no don't you understand? It does bring a number of benefits in terms of the ability of many of the electorate to be able to participate in the election. It does put an extra little bit of distance between the election and Christmas, and it does not inconvenience our ability to conclude our business in this Parliament in any way. It could be done. We could get our business finished and prorogue at the end of this week. So it's entirely doable. And I do not understand why the government, who have been so determined that there must be an election as soon as possible, would be so resistant to doing that for 3 days earlier. I say let's do it as soon as possible in order to get this lot out as soon as possible. Finally, Chair, just on the amendment in the name of the Minister, just to thank the government, uncharacteristically, for introducing this technical amendment, which I hope the House will support, which simply eradicates a current disadvantage there would be in the electoral registration process in Scotland, occasioned by the fact that we have a bank holiday on St Andrew's Day, the 30th of November. I hope the House will pass that and put us all on a level playing field. And with that, I shall conclude my remarks and look forward to the general election to come.